Don, you were just telling some war stories, two of them. You got to repeat them because it got everybody in the room heavy laughing. So you're on your way back to the Airport.
I was, and going as a rental car to catch an airplane. I thought the airport was on the west side, so I'd have enough time, but it's on the north side, so I flew through town, came up over this hill, and as I started down the hill, I saw a cop, a state policeman on the right-hand side, and I knew I was cooked, so and he had a radar on a stand like this. And I knew I was cooked, so I pulled right over and I jumped out of the car as he got to my car. And I took my license out and I handed it to him and I said, "You got to send me the ticket." I said, "Because I'm late for an airplane and blah, blah, blah." And he said, "Send you the ticket?" He said, "I'm going to send you to jail," he said. And so I talked and babbled, and finally he threw the license back at him, and he said, "I'm not going to give you a ticket." He said, "But I'm going to follow you to the airport. If you go 1 mile over the speed limit, I'm taking you to jail," he said. Fortunately, I made it without any problems.
And then more recently, you were traveling from Letchworth State Park?
Yep, to Canandaigua, where we lived, and we went through this town, I can't remember the name of it, and they had just paved the road in the village. And there was a car in front of me going about 2 miles an hour, and I pulled around him, recognizing that I was in the village, but there was no stripe on the road because it had just been paved. And I kept thinking about that and talking about it. And I got out of the town and started up the hill, and sure enough, there comes a policeman behind me, pulls over, and he got to the window of my car, and I started flapping the minute he got there. I said there was no line on the road, and I was able to, and I wasn't going too fast. And he said, "Sir, it's okay." I said I was going around him, and I wasn't. He said, "If you don't shut up," he said, "I'm going."
So Don, we're celebrating our 20th anniversary of the Jackson Center. Who knew?
Yeah.
And I have images of many images of you. One of them is a picture when we had the I don't know if it was a gubernatorial candidate, but Elliot Spitzer,
yes,
and you were hosting it.
Yes, that's right. Up in the conference room on the second floor. Yeah, it was before he had to resign from. I was just thinking this morning, it was I was there at the Jackson Center for a period in 2010. And I can remember we were celebrating the 10th anniversary, or at least talking about it. And when you said this morning, or at lunch, that it was the 20th, I couldn't believe that the 10 years had gone by so fast.
How did you get exposed to the center? I mean, you're a Chautauquan,
yeah,
and now a native or a resident of Chautauqua.
Yeah.
How did you get exposed to it?
It's hard to remember, actually. It seems to me that I had been reading a biography, not of Jackson, but I know it, one of John Barrett's recommendations about That Man or something, and talking about Roosevelt, and Jackson is prominently mentioned in there. And I just thought, what an interesting guy, and his writings were so cogent and so readable and so understandable that I felt, I'd like to read a little more about him. And then found out that there was a thing called the Jackson Center just down the road. And so I got there and found it very interesting, and then got a chance to meet everybody, and served on a couple of committees. I was on the search committee, and that's how I got involved. And we were having trouble finding someone adequate for the job.
This was after Raleigh retired.
Yeah, this was, or he was just retiring, I guess, and the search was not coming up with anything that looked good, and I said, well, geez, we got to do something, and I don't remember how exactly we got into the discussion, but I met with you, and I said, you know, this is kind of what I did for a living, and step in to run something that was needed some expertise, none of which I had, but I made it sound like I did. So in any event, I said I'd be glad to step in for a period of time while we continue the search. And that's really how I got to be executive director on a temporary basis.
Do you remember who the staff was at the time?
Oh dear, I'll never remember names, but
Was Carol there then?
Carol was there, and she was the best. And we had a young woman who you had recently hired for donations and things of that.
Tracy? Is that Tracy Bogdan?
Yes, Tracy.
Bogdan.
That was it. And I was trying to work with her in how to develop the proper kind of fundraising operation. She's a very nice young woman and working hard, and I thought we could help, and got into a lot of discussions about how to do it and what to do. I even invited one time Dave Williams, a fellow that worked at the institution, who was doing that, who had just retired, and I thought maybe he might be able to offer some help for her. So we spent a lot of time. I wrote maybe a half a dozen job descriptions of people of the kind of work that I thought had to be done and so forth. My problem I wish I could have stayed longer at the institution at the Jackson Center than I did. I was on a 6-month time frame because so involved with Chautauqua that I knew I'd need to be there for the summer, and I couldn't do both, obviously. So it was bittersweet. I really would have liked to have stayed with it longer and made a better effect on what was going on at the time.
Now, during that time, though, we did have a lot of activity. And
Oh, yeah.
You were and I remember seeing, again, talk about Elliot Spitzer, among other people.
Yeah.
Did you get a sense of the center, maybe what it was and maybe what it could be?
Yeah, I think from the time I got involved, it was trying to understand, get your arms around what the center could be, more than what it was, because we were, in those first 10 years, it was trying to keep it afloat. We had just started the archives and things of that nature. The building wasn't even finished, the work that was done. In fact, Raleigh handed that off to me, of which I knew absolutely nothing. But we had a good time trying to figure it out. Trying to get a strategic view of where the institution ought to be going and what it could do. And we spent a lot of time talking about that. I don't know that we ever came to any more of a conclusion than exists today. You mentioned at lunch the three-legged stool. And I think that's really a valuable way to look at the future. But I think long term, we're going to have to find some partnership of some type, either through a university or through an organization that can really help fund what we're trying to do and what we're doing, because it's been very difficult from day to day to keep the funding in order to support what we are doing. So I think it's a long-term, 20-year project, and it's coming to a point where it's mature enough now and mature enough in its outlook to be appealing to some other organization that can support us, not take us over by any means, at all, but be able to support and help us with the strategic plan as we go forward.
Do you remember any personalities as you've been involved in the beginning? Exclude me, but anybody that you just sort of met through the process?
Yeah, again, at my age, it's trouble remembering names, but the fellow at the University of Mississippi James Meredith. I can remember when he came to the center, I had an opportunity to sit with him before he was to present and so forth. Fascinating individual, and was very able to describe what was going on in his life, and I found him just fascinating. I really did. Elliot Spitzer was another one. We had a chance to chat for a few minutes. I think he was going to Chautauqua to speak, or had just come. I can't remember what that was. But he was very interesting and willing to talk. There are others that don't come to mind immediately, but I sure remember James Meredith very clearly. What he looked like and his posture and so on. There were a lot of those people. You brought an awful lot of wonderful people to the center to speak, and I had the opportunity to meet most of them. Didn't have a chance to talk to all of them in any depth, but they were very interesting people.
As you will be, hopefully you'll be able to, on December 14th, come to our 20th anniversary, and they ask you to say something as sort of a visionary statement from a sage like yourself, a senior sage. Yes. What do you think you might say?
Well, I don't know. I haven't thought about it, but I would probably approach it from the standpoint of what I had mentioned just a few minutes ago, of trying to find a contact, entree into some other organizations. And vision being that we've got to expand our audience outside of just Jamestown, Chautauqua County, as much as it is a Chautauqua County organization. I think to be able to get to the next steps, to move substantially ahead, I think we're going to have to expand that view, that audience. I'm not exactly sure how to do it. I know how Chautauqua Institution is doing it with an office in Washington, D.C. And they're not spending a whole lot of money for it. There's the building they're in is like an incubator. The owner is very conscious of trying to support organizations like ours, like Chautauqua. And I think we're going to have to think about how to do that and how to make those contacts and really push that envelope a little bit. I'm not sure exactly how to do that, but we do know lots of people in Washington. We do know a lot of those folks. And I think we're going to have to find the key to getting those people really interested in Chautauqua, in the Jackson Center, and finding a way to put that together somehow. So vision is difficult, but I think that's got to be something the future holds for the institute, for the center.
Well, the nice thing is we're pretty simple.
Yeah.
I mean, they're looking at the legacy of Jackson. Really, those 3 points we talked about earlier today at lunch. You got the domestic side, which has a whole myriad of things: Attorney General, Solicitor General, Supreme Court, the international criminal law, which Jim and others are a part of, and of course how's the guy from Spring Creek who never went to college, never graduated from law school, become who he was. All lessons to be learned, but the nice thing, it's attracted people like Don Greenhouse to be interested, and that's what I find very appealing.
Yeah, and it is totally appealing. It's interesting. I talk to a lot of people at Chautauqua, and many of them have been to the center and think it's just, isn't that wonderful? Where did that get started from? How is it funded, et cetera, et cetera? And there are people who are really interested in it, maybe only temporarily, but they are interesting, and there got to be more of those to become a larger cohort for the operation. It's a spectacular idea. It really is when you think about who Jackson was. And somebody mentioned at lunch that every Supreme Court nominee has in some form or another mentioned Jackson. And that's because he stands out as one of the greats. And we have the ability to show that. It's not always easy, but that's the future. That's the vision. Maybe move now a little bit away from the Nuremberg focus. That was critical to get us started. But I think we need to start thinking about the other legs of the stool and finding a very specific way to bring that point across to the public.
You're good. Thank you, Don. This is great.
Thank you. I'm glad to. As I said, I'm only sorry I could only be there for a short period of time. I would like to have implemented some of this vision, and I think we could have done that, and I think others who are now involved will be able to do that.
Thank you very much.
You bet.